Okay, well, hello and welcome to the fourth workshop in our fall 2022 Now Encore series. I'm Lisa Reichert. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Career and Professional Development Lead with People and Organization Development, which is part of People and Culture. And I want to thank you all for joining us today for our workshop, which is self-onboarding strategies to thrive in your new job now and in your career. And I am very excited to introduce today's subject matter expert on the topic of onboarding, Dr. Angela Rogers. So Angela Michelle Rogers just completed her PhD in workforce education and development at Penn State. I mean, just less than a week ago. So Dr. Rogers also did her dissertation on onboarding. So congratulations, Dr. Rogers, and thank you for being here. And we have the privilege of Dr. Rogers sharing her research and her expertise on the topic of onboarding. So a little bit more about Dr. Rogers. She was previously a training partner with the Penn State University Center for Workforce Learning and Performance and the co-chair of the Penn State Commission for Women. Dr. Rogers is a distinguished Toastmaster. She is a member of the Association for Training and Development and the Pittsburgh chapter, currently serving as the chapter president. And she is a qualitative researcher and a certified en vivo expert. In addition to onboarding, Dr. Rogers' interests are human resource development, practice, career development, organizational development, individual agency, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Dr. Rogers, welcome, and thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for that introduction. I feel like a star. And thank you to everyone being here today for self-onboarding strategies. I am really excited to be here to share with you the results of the research that I just defended last week. And this is not brand new. I've talked about self-onboarding before and the importance of individual proactivity in onboarding, but I really have a lot of great evidence behind what I'm talking about now. And I'm really delighted to share with you really concrete strategies and tools to make your onboarding experience work for you as a new hire, to have a good start in your new job and to set you up to be thriving in your career going ahead. Let's see here, I'm in control of my slides. Where's my slide advancer thingy? That's not it. There it is. There we go. So today we're going to talk about what exactly is onboarding. Why do you need to do it yourself, or DIY, or SOS? We're going to look at 3 types of tools that I have for you: a needs assessment, which you already have, a checklist, and an evaluation. We're going to talk about how do you fill in the gaps between what you're getting and what you need. And then I'm going to share more tips for success that come from the research that I conducted. My objectives for you today are to understand your role in onboarding as a new hire. And if you're here in a different role, maybe you're here in a talent recruitment or an HR role, this will be helpful for you to understand how to coach the new hires to act in their own interests and to be proactive, and maybe how you can lay the groundwork for them to be proactive in a way that will be so they can be successful. And I'll explain a little bit why that's important in a few minutes. Newcomers, you want to prepare to be proactive. We're going to use the tools that I have for you today to assess, plan, and evaluate your onboarding. And as I said, you're going to onboard successfully and set you up for long-term career success down the road. So let's start off with a poll to guide some of this discussion today, make sure we're all in agreement about what we're talking about. What is onboarding? And Lisa, you can launch that poll now. This is multiple choice, but you can check more than one.
Okay, everyone has completed the poll and I will share the results.
All of the above. Excellent. Yes, that's a great answer. Let's look through some of the other responses that people didn't select. So what is onboarding? HR tasks to sign up for pay and benefits. So that's a very narrow definition of onboarding. And in many places, that's the definition that is used. And when HR completes its responsibilities, it feels like the onboarding is over. And that's the case where I work part-time right now. Getting my computer set up. An essential part of onboarding, you need your computer, your phone, your purchasing card, any other resources from your new employer. You need those things, but just getting those in and of themselves does not mean your onboarding is done, but it's an important component. Meeting coworkers, another very important component, and maybe one of the most important ones when it comes to successful onboarding, but not the whole story, right? Learning about the new workplace, another important aspect of onboarding, but not the whole thing. These are parts. So everybody said all of the above, which is the answer that I would give if I were answering this poll. Does anybody have any questions or comments so far about onboarding and what we're talking about?
Yeah, I was just writing into the chat. I started work 2 months ago and I'm still onboarding. I mean, I'm still trying to get a card. You mentioned some kind of card I need. I got an email this weekend that's like, here's how to do your job with the specifics of my exact job. And I'm like, wow, it would have been good to have that 2 months ago.
Yes, it would have.
Yeah. So anyway, one thing I'm thinking about is just like how long the onboarding process can take or should take or whatever.
That's a great question. And the result, when I did my literature review before I did my study, the results, they say, oh, it can vary from 2 weeks to 1 year. That's kind of the way the time frame has been set up. It hasn't been really looked at in a more precise way. My study, in terms of the time frame, I did an 8-week study, and at the end of the 8 weeks, half of the people said they felt fully onboarded, and half said they did not feel fully onboarded. So I'm thinking 8 weeks might be a good benchmark to start with, but I think it depends on the complexity of the job, the size of the organization. 8 to 12 weeks might be a good starting point, and then kind of build on from there or take away from there based on, sort of what all learning needs to happen, right? So the timing is a great question. Other comments or questions related to our opening poll or opening discussion here?
I didn't mean to be zoning out, but I honestly can't already remember the other questions. I just knew it was all of the above. But I'm actually attending from a different perspective. I'm a supervisor looking at beefing up our onboarding program within our own unit. So I was thinking that attending would be helpful. Oh yeah, this is okay. Thank you. Would be really helpful. And I think what I was thinking lands in the learning about my new workplace, which is a challenge we seem to have is getting people to understand the different areas within the university and what units that you actually do business with. And I think that can sometimes take people, that probably is what takes people into the 2 years round of onboarding. But we're trying to find a way to create a checklist so we can shorten that time frame for us.
Right. It does. Yeah, it takes a long time in a complex organization like a university. It takes a long time to learn the lay of the land. Right. But I'm so glad that you're here because hiring managers have such an important role. I mentioned before that oftentimes HR, they do their thing, they get you signed up for your pay and your benefits and all that stuff. And then they feel like, okay, we're done. Go to your work area now. And there's has to be a handoff between human resources to the hiring manager of the work area, because that's where the bulk of the onboarding is going to happen. And so it's so important. So important. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so why do newcomers have to be proactive and do onboarding themselves? Well, it's because even when their new employer has great intentions and maybe even has a terrific onboarding plan, newcomers are still going to encounter problems. And in my study, I had 34 people who were starting new jobs do a diary entry for me once a week for 8 weeks while they were on their new job. And they were from all over the country, even some international people, all kinds of different jobs. And these, on this slide, it shows the kinds of problems that these newcomers found. And these are in order, sort of. The top grouping is how I group them. They're from the organization side of things. And then the bottom four, that grouping, that is more individual problems. But all of them are having an impact on the newcomer's ability to feel like they're onboarding successfully. So at the top, information overload, just getting way too much stuff to learn and to do and to figure out in too short of a time. People felt overwhelmed. You've probably heard about this before, as like drinking from a fire hose. That's the idea here. There was just too much being thrown at them. Unclear expectations. They didn't know what they were supposed to do. Awkward interactions with their new coworkers. You'll see in another slide or two that a very important strategy that the newcomers used to learn about their new workplace and meet their coworkers was to ask questions. And sometimes when they asked those questions, they didn't get helpful answers or answers at all. Or even if they didn't ask questions, the behaviors directed to them from their new coworkers was awkward. And I use the term awkward in a very broad sense. And this covers a pretty wide range of behaviors that are just people ignoring them or not being helpful, all the way to people being rude and uncivil. So there's a whole range of severity in that idea of awkward interactions. Another problem was isolation. This was true for both newcomers who were working remotely and onboarding remotely, and for those who were also in their office, being left alone. Sometimes it happened because their supervisor, their manager, was out of town for the week that they were starting, and they didn't know who they were supposed to talk to or who was supposed to give them their work. Barriers, that's a lot of communication barriers, problems logging into systems, problems accessing the knowledge base, those kinds of barriers. Resource delays, that relates to that poll question, which is getting my computer set up. People mentioned they didn't have their computer, they didn't get their password, they didn't get their telephone number, or they needed a purchasing card, or they were supposed to have a company car, or they needed to have a test done to allow them to go into hospitals. Someone was like traveling and selling surgical equipment. They had some kind of accreditation that needed to be completed before they were actually able to do their job. All these things, these delays, harmed their onboarding. Communication challenges. Some of this had to do with, again, some of it had to do with remote working. If you have someone whose company is based on the West Coast and that person is working remotely from the East Coast, their work days overlap, but they would start in the morning and not be able to reach their manager for a couple of hours. And so they couldn't communicate with them or get answers from their manager or their other team members. In other cases, those communication challenges had to do with language. You have a Chinese student working at a company in Switzerland, getting all his paperwork in German. He speaks Chinese and he speaks English, but he doesn't speak German. So something to think about, especially if you think you're going to have international people with different primary languages, different languages. Organizational volatility. This came up with organizations where there continued to be turnover, with change processes that were in progress as the newcomer was being brought in, or other changes in the organization that were ongoing, and that made it difficult for the newcomer to adjust because things were very changeable, and what they thought they knew or could count on one day was not the same the next day. So those were all of the top challenges from the organization. Does anybody have a question or comment about those?
Yeah, I guess I'm self-onboarding by participating here. I'm thinking of an awkward interaction where I asked the person in an office, a couple over, where the microwave was to heat up my lunch. And they looked at me like, well, who are you? Like, did you just walk off the street? It's like, I'm dressed professionally, anyway. And a barrier that I'm encountering, this is tough, but the parking lots where I'm supposed to park are full.
Mhm.
I've actually turned around and gone back home and worked remotely because I could not park, which is, it's a UC Berkeley problem, but it's a barrier to
Mhm.
being there in person and doing all the other things, interacting and, using the equipment and whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing those examples. I love those examples. I mean, I don't love them that they happen to you, but I think they're very illustrative. But let's look at some of these individual problems. And they're individual because when I analyze the data from my newcomers, from their diary entries, they said, I am feeling this, or I am having this happen to me. They really indicated that it was their problem. They weren't blaming or holding the organization responsible for it. It wasn't a manager or coworker or someone from the organization who was doing it to them. So I hope that's clear in how I sort of divided these up. Anxiety, the top one. Anxiety relating a lot to the information overload and the unclear expectations and the awkward interactions and all those barriers up there. Work-life balance concerns. And this, again, came up along the lines of people working from home, having to balance maybe some childcare issues and do work at the same time, especially if their partner got sick, something like that. Sickness came up as some other concerns related to work-life balance. That also came into play with people who had the communication challenges and trying to figure out, well, if I extend my workday so that I can be available when the people on the West Coast are starting or more available to them, how do I balance my schedule so that I'm not working 12 hours a day, that kind of thing. External events, life happens, right? Life continues to happen. People said that different things affected their ability to work, that these were external events that people had no control over. So if their boss got sick, the war in Ukraine affected people whose companies have an international footprint. And so they were impacted more, had colleagues who were impacted more directly. COVID continued to be a disruptive external event for folks. And someone's best friend was in a car accident and nearly killed. So, and also another person, the shooting at the grocery store in New York that happened in the spring. She worked at a grocery store not that far away. So it felt very close to her and affected her in a sense. And boredom. So boredom is very interesting. People said they felt bored. They weren't sure what to do. I think this boredom is coming out of, well, they don't have their resources. They're isolated. They don't have clear expectations. So they can't do their work. They can't even do their training. And they're waiting and they're bored. So I don't know if any of you have ever encountered that. That's a great question to ask. So have any of you felt this kind of boredom because of not really knowing what you're supposed to be doing? All right. Any other
nods?
Okay, great. Yeah, no one has to raise their hand or anything like that. Any other comments or reflections or questions about these problems? The people in my study, these problems came out of their answer to a question about what was hindering them in their onboarding. And I asked them this question every week for 8 weeks. Okay, sounds like we can move on. So the way that these newcomers dealt with those hindering issues, with those problems, was in 2 ways. First, they were hopeful. And second, they were proactive. Hope made them be ready to be proactive. And so that's one of the important takeaways for you as a new hire when you're starting. If you feel like you're running into problems, you're having all these hindering things, be hopeful that you can make a difference. And the things that my newcomers in the study were hopeful about were 1, to make allies, 2, to manage their time better. And you can see how that can be connected to that idea of being overloaded, feeling overwhelmed and having too many things thrown at them. They wanted to be able to manage their time better so that they can handle. Did someone have a question?
I think somebody came off mute by accident.
Okay, all right.
So
I'll just go ahead then.
Right.
Time management. They were hopeful. They wanted to perform successfully and they hoped to be proactive, which is an interesting hope. I'm hoping to be proactive, but if you hope to be proactive, that can be the step toward being proactive the next day, right? Any questions about those hopes?
It looks like you're saying that doing these things, like having allies and make time management stuff, will make you hopeful? Or the other way around?
It's the other way around. They were hoping to do those things. Yeah, good question. So that leads us into taking actions to help themselves or being proactive. And the number 1 action they took was to ask questions. And I referred to this earlier when I was talking about those awkward interactions. The newcomers asking questions is how they get the information they need, asking questions and asking for what they need. So their coworkers need to be ready to answer them in a helpful way and to be responsive and constructive with responding to those questions that they're going to ask. Something else that newcomers said was to feel confident, prioritizing their needs. This prioritizing needs relates to, okay, I'm just not going to wait anymore for this IT guy to get back to me. I am going to be proactive and be clear with him about what I need. Or I'm going to make sure I set aside this time every morning to review my email and get my questions ready. So taking charge of what they needed to do to be onboarded is part of that prioritizing needs. Having a positive attitude. A lot of people mention that, it doesn't help to be, oh, woe is me, when things happen, but to have a positive attitude and to see it as you've learned something, right? The weekly logging, that was my study. They said that was helpful to them. I didn't ask them directly if logging was helpful to them. They voluntarily said it was. So, but they said it was helpful to them. Most of my participants logged on Thursday or Friday. So they were reflecting on their experiences in the week and thinking about what they needed to do in the week ahead. And they found that to be helpful. Previous experience was also helpful to newcomers. And something else that was interesting, and I noticed, I asked my study participants to say if they were early in their career, middle career, or later in their career, and divided them into those three groups based on what they said. I noticed that the later career and middle career people took more actions to help themselves. They seem to be more proactive or more aware of the value of being proactive. And the early career folks were not as proactive. And I think they just didn't realize that they could do that, right? So something to think about if you're in a supervisory role, someone that's coming in that's earlier in their career might not be as prepared to be proactive, whereas someone who's got a lot more experience, well, they're going to use that previous experience to onboard themselves and to make their adjustments in their new job. Taking notes, people mentioned taking notes, writing down notes, creating cheat sheets for themselves, and then helping others. So in the course of being onboarded themselves, newcomers mentioned other people being hired after them, and they reached out to those newer hires and helped them, and that helped them back in a way, because that saying, you learn when you teach, right? So helping others. So all of these things were actions that these newcomers took to help themselves. Questions or comments or reflections on this information?
I think it's helpful to think about how people are at different stages in their career when you're thinking about how to help people on board. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, we'll go on then. So we're at the needs assessment, and we shared with you the onboarding needs assessment tool ahead of time. And I don't know if everybody had a chance to really look at the tool, but I'll assume that you did not have time to look at the tool because that's usually how it goes. And so this onboarding needs assessment is for you to think about what you need to plan for or ask for in your onboarding. And so these are the questions. First question is, who am I caring for or supporting? And that has to do with what are your family demands? Are you moving, do you have a whole family that needs to get resettled? Have you moved? And well, that's another question, but what are the family demands that you have to be thinking about, not just yourself, or maybe it's just yourself. How familiar am I with the organization? Am I transferring? Am I moving up? Am I brand new? Where am I in my career path? How much change or stress am I experiencing? And that was something I asked the newcomers in my study, what changes they were experiencing as a result of their new job. Working remote was a major change that they faced. That was probably the biggest one. And another one was being promoted. And a third one was learning a new industry. So they had a similar job, but they were changing industries. Before I give you a few minutes to work on the self-assessment on your own, does anybody have any questions? Are any of the items unclear? Okay, it sounds like not. All right, so Lisa, let's give folks about 10 minutes to work through this onboarding needs self-assessment on their own.
All right, sounds good. It is 12:04 Pacific time by my watch, so we'll come back at 12:14. We have about 2 more minutes left for this, for you to complete or review your needs assessment.
Okay, everybody can come back now and we'll regroup and debrief our working on the needs assessment. I see people are coming back in. Okay, so I want to share with you that I actually started a new job in January of 2022 while I left the job that I did have because I needed to find part-time work so that I would have the capacity to finish my dissertation. So I started a new job January 3rd, 2022, and went through a lot of these same things myself. And I filled out this onboarding needs assessment thinking about how I was feeling in January of 2022 when I started my new job. So who am I caring for, supporting? Well, at the time and still now, I have a partner and I have children, but they're older. They don't really demand that much of my time. They need rides to work from time to time, but they're not like little kids that are requiring a lot of attention. How familiar? So what questions or concerns do I have? I would say if my kids were younger, my questions would be about what's the flexibility like in the schedule? If my kids are sick and I have to go pick them up from school, are there family sick days? That would be a question that I might have if I had younger children. How familiar am I with this organization? In my case, I was transitioning to a different part of the university here at Penn State. So I was transitioning from an academic department to a research lab that's a little bit separated and walled off in a way because it does some classified work. So they had an intranet there that I had to learn about and even a separate email account. So I still have my Penn State email account, but now I have an additional email account just for my work organization. And I wasn't even sure how to log in to my new email account for about a week, I would say. So how to use the internet, how to access my separate email account. This was a second job for me, a second career path for me, and I was thinking of it as temporary. So that was part of my thinking with filling this out. How much stress was I experiencing? Not that much, really. I did need to learn several systems and procedures for work, including the internet and where to find things. What's my preferred learning method? Well, I like to learn things on my own, like using a video, but I also like to have a person I can go to or someone who will coach me through some new things. And for how do I seek information? Do I like a person or do I want to look it up on the web? Well, I like both options. And then my main concerns, I remember one of my concerns was, is there a lunchroom somewhere or do I have to eat lunch at my desk? And the other thing was, it was so cold in the office space. Most of the other staff were still working remotely and I was coming into the office. So I was pretty much there all by myself. Talk about being isolated. And it was so cold because it was in the wintertime. And I just needed to figure out how I could requisition a space heater for my cubicle. So some of those basic physiological needs, right, were some of my concerns. I'd like to hear from some other folks about what did you think about this self-assessment? Is there anything you want to share about what you wrote or your overall thinking about using this as a tool? I'd love to hear from a couple of people about it.
Yeah, I don't mind it. Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I want to add something. One of the things that I've had change recently, I was hired in May, and I work for one of the libraries in the Berkeley campus, and during the summer we have regular night hours, but my role is to be the nighttime person. So as the
Mhm,
semester has started, what I was used to a certain kind of work, having coworkers around, now I'm essentially the only staff member
mhm,
in the evening. So the hard part for me has been trying to figure out how do I stay part of our work group and kind of keep up with everyone when I'm only overlapping with them for like a couple of hours a day.
mhm. Right, right. I can see that. Even though you're on site, you have the similar problem that a remote worker might have who's in a different time zone.
Yeah, it's a little odd. So a lot of my work is in the evenings is just trying to catch up with what they're doing during the day, like all the emails that I've missed out on or projects that I've seen, and constant checking. And so the measuring there, if we're thinking about onboarding ourselves, is um, trying to figure out spaces in time, it's a time where I can check in with supervisors to kind of keep up with everything that's been changing from day to day in our
Mhm.
libraries.
Yeah, that's a great comment because I hadn't thought that much about people who work different shifts. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's a really insightful. I appreciate it. Other reflections on the self-assessment. Did you find it to be useful or, you know, not so useful? Or I'd love to hear that because this is probably only the second time that I've done this kind of workshop and used the self-assessment. So your feedback really does make a difference to me. Oh, I see. Andrea, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Hi there. Sorry, I logged on late. I was at the new employee orientation earlier this morning, so I am still
Yay.
pretty new. So I found this helpful just for, when you first start in a role, there's so much that you need to learn and it can feel a little overwhelming. So this was helpful just to create a little bit more structure in how I'm thinking about all of my onboarding. So I like this tool.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other comments or reflections on the self-assessment tool?
Yeah, sorry, there's a skateboarder outside of my office. No, I thought it was really useful, and especially of having them all listed next to each other. I think I have a tendency to sort of undersell. I'm like, oh yeah, it's fine. Like, I moved and then started a new job 2 days later. Like, whatever. But then this having it all in one place of like, okay, a lot is happening and there are a lot of stressors and things that I wouldn't have really given myself credit for or given attention to. That was helpful.
Right, right. Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think that in my study, my participants, they were having all these things going on, just like you said, like moving and they have to get a place to live, or they're onboarding remotely, or just all these different things going on. But they were so driven to perform and show that you hired the right person and I am going to be a great employee. They really wanted to prove themselves. And so you can see there's the tension, right, between needing to really get adjusted and meet your needs, your basic needs, right? And but also feeling this pressure, a lot of it self-imposed, to perform and prove yourself. And so I hope that one of the things with this needs assessment is take a breath and make sure you're getting what you need to set yourself up for success. And you will perform successfully, but it takes time. It takes time to adjust, and you need to give yourself the time and the tools that you need to do that. And managers need to know that too, and make sure that if they can do or say anything to take the pressure off the new hire, because the new hire is, like I said, pressuring themselves. Take that pressure off so that you can learn, you can relax, you can enjoy yourself, and you can have a mindset that will allow you to adjust more easily. So great, great. All right, unless there's another comment or question, we're going to move on.
I had one short one.
Yes.
Which is that I started part-time work at UC Berkeley, and I have a part-time private practice. And so that adding up to full-time and coordinating those two is really difficult. But I'm also concerned about being able to move forward on my career path, since I'm only working part-time, but I still want to move forward. And this assessment helped me realize I don't need to just worry about that. There's probably somebody out there who's has some expertise in moving forward in a career if you're a part-time worker. Somewhere in people and culture here at Berkeley, there's probably somebody who knows about that.
Yeah. And a great comment too about part-time work. So I've been working part-time for the past 9 months. And I noticed that in many places, part-timers get even less onboarding than full-timers do. And so it's kind of even a double-edged sword. You start part-time, people say, oh, they're just part-time. We don't need to give them the whole onboarding. We can just do a little bit of onboarding. But then that part-timer down the road shifts into a full-time role, and people say, oh, well, they've been here as part-timers, so they don't need onboarding. I would just say, even if you're part-time, your onboarding is still important. And you don't assume, right, that someone who's shifting from part-time into full-time doesn't need to do any onboarding, because they do. Because it's often neglected even more for part-time hires than for full-time hires. Oh, yes, twice as long when you're part-time. Good comment. Yes, because you're not there for the full 40 hours. Good comment. Yeah, okay, let's move ahead now to the onboarding checklist. So you've assessed your needs. And one of the things that people in my study said that they really found helpful was a checklist. And it's not uncommon. It's pretty common for folks in human resources and talent acquisition to have a checklist, but they don't always share their checklist with the new hire. What I've noticed is HR, they have their checklist. This is what I need to do to get the new person onboarded. But the new person doesn't have that checklist. And it's a pretty short checklist because it's just what the responsibilities of that HR person are. So the onboarding checklist that I'm going to share with you is very expansive. There might be some things on there that don't apply to you or you don't need, and that's perfectly fine. But it's going to start getting you to think about, well, did I get this? How am I going to get this? And if my workplace is not giving this to me in a plan already, then how am I going to get what I need? And Lisa, you can share that document, the onboarding checklist.
Done. So
All right.
the link to the self-onboarding checklist is in the chat.
Thank you so much. So just to give you a preview of this checklist, and then I'm going to turn you loose again for a few minutes to work on your own with this, so here's an example of an item. Payroll and benefits sign up. Do I need this? Yes, you do need this. What is the priority? Well, for most people, that's probably a priority one, top priority. Is my workplace offering this to me? Who's providing it? And yes, my HR rep, Jenna Smith-Chen, had the new hire meeting on May 10th, and we went over all of that. So that's good. I don't need to take any additional assertive actions or proactivity to get that because that is done. What are the conditions of employment? Often that's included like in the professional handbook. Do I need this? Yes. Is it important? Yes. Am I getting it? Yes. My HR rep, Jana Smith-Chen, she's awesome. She got me my my new hire manual that details the conditions of employment. So going down the list, you can see if you're looking at the checklist, professional introduction, jargons, terms, acronyms. If you're new, you probably need a tour of your work facility, the town and nearby places. What's the transportation like? Can I get the bus? Or do most people take a bicycle or drive, or parking could go in that section too? What's the parking situation? Parking is a nightmare at Penn State too. What are the safety and emergency procedures and resources? How do I get out of here when the alarm goes off? Where is the muster location? So I'm not going to read all of these because I know you all can read. So I'm going to give you maybe 10 minutes is longer than we need. Should we do 7 minutes? Would that work better? Can I see a thumbs up for folks if they think 7 is good amount of time to have some individual work time on this? I am seeing thumbs up. All right, great. So Lisa, let's give folks 7 minutes to work with the onboarding checklist, and then we'll come back and debrief. Okay, so you feel free to turn off your camera to work on this yourself.
Great. So it's 12:30 by my watch. We'll come back at 12:37 Pacific time.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Okay, you have about 2 minutes left to work on your self-onboarding checklist.
Okay, it's 3:37 p.m. in the East Coast, and that means it's 12:37 p.m. on the West Coast. So let's regroup and talk a little bit about the self-onboarding checklist. Does anybody have any overall thoughts that you'd like to share to start us off?
I'll add something. I guess from a supervisor perspective, I think it's really great to do something like this because you're taking ownership in your onboarding, and I think that's really great. But I also can imagine wanting to hear about this with a new person, so we can see what specific areas they could use help with other than the onboarding checklist that we might have.
Mhm. That's a great comment. Yes, I would say we do want the newcomer to be proactive, but that doesn't mean they're going it alone, right? This checklist is a tool to work with your supervisor or a buddy or mentor, and I'll talk a little bit about that, so that you can ask your supervisor for what you need and ask them to help you get what you need. For example, on this checklist, the third item is a professional introduction. And do I need this? Yes, I need this. Is it a priority? Well, let's say number two, right? Not the most important thing, but, and is the workplace offering this to me? Well, I wrote no. Oftentimes, places that are hiring, they're not hiring all the time. They're hiring occasionally. And so they forget, oh yeah, I should introduce this new person to all their new colleagues to get them started off on the right foot, right? What's a way that the newcomer can be proactive about this? Well, I could draft an email for my supervisor that's introducing me, maybe even include a picture that they could then send out. So that's one thing that you can do. What about getting a tour of the workplace, the town, or nearby places? So like Berkeley, Penn State is a large university. I've lived here for quite a long time, but new people coming in often have no idea how vast the campus is and what all kinds of resources and amenities and things there are and how to get around. it really surprises me, actually. Some people, they get hired, they go to their building, and they don't really learn anything about the university beyond the building they work in. I can't imagine that, but that does happen because they don't think about it and nobody thought of it for them. So that's another thing. I wouldn't say that's a top priority, but one of the things you can do is you can find a buddy to take a tour. If we have a campus loop, you probably have a bus or campus loop at Berkeley. One of the things I always suggest to new people is to jump on the blue loop. It's free and it goes around in a circle. So you can jump on the stop closest to your building, ride it all the way around and jump off again at the stop closest to your building. And we have a white loop that goes around in the opposite direction, same thing. So that's an easy way to get the nickel tour, if you will, of our campus. Does Berkeley have a campus bus or a loop?
Yeah, it has ones that go all over the place.
Okay, cool. So that would be a way to do that. What are some of the other things? I'd love to hear from you about some of the items that grabbed your attention that you wrote something down for. Would anybody like to share about any of those particular items?
Learning who does what. I'm in an academic department and, you know, I'm told, go ask whoever, and I don't know what their role is. So I don't know what's appropriate to ask them. And you were talking about the turnover or whatever, like the two main people who would have been my resources too have both left. So like there's no resources left.
Right.
And yeah, so just actually having an org chart or whatever, just to understand who does what, it would be super helpful.
I feel your pain. Yeah, figuring out for people who have been there for a while, they know, and it's kind of unconscious knowledge, like, oh yeah, this, you go to Sally in IT for that. And the new person, they don't know Sally's the person to go to. Do you have an idea of how you can get the org chart or find out who your go-to person would be in particular work areas?
I guess it would be asking individual people like what their structure is around them. I mean, my boss could also tell me that, but she's busy.
Right.
And like I say, I'm in an academic department, so you know, it can be awkward to say to the chief financial person, so who are your reports or whatever. Yeah, anyway.
Right. So I think your situation is such a great example, a very typical situation that a new hire might find themselves in. And so people who are here in roles that relate to talent and HR and who are managers or supervisors, I hope you're hearing that it can be very awkward to come in and like, what, you want me to ask the director this question? Well, you know, it can feel awkward. And people in my study talked about these same kinds of things. Someone said, well, it was great that I was told, I was given a list of people that I should set up get to know you meetings with, but that none of them had any idea that I was going to be contacting them about it. And it felt really awkward. They weren't really ready for me to call them. It would have been nice if someone had let them know I would be calling or even schedule the appointments for me, because I don't know what the rules are, the guidelines around contacting people here are. So even if there's no rule and everybody's casual and it's very informal and everybody's very nice, as an insider, well, maybe you know that, but the new person coming in, they do not know. They do not know that. So this onboarding checklist, I think someone also made a point earlier, don't go it alone. Just because you're being proactive And I called this self-onboarding strategies. You don't have to be all alone in doing it. You want to tap into the resources, your supervisor, your go-to person, a buddy or mentor if you have them. Any other comments or questions about this? And then we're going to move on. All right. The evaluation form, I'm not going to spend the time on that like I thought I would, because it's really just the same as the checklist, but the purpose of this is to evaluate what you're getting. Maybe you do get a professional introduction, but it doesn't really meet your needs. It's only partially helpful. And that happens a lot. Some onboarding is offered. It's kind of okay, but not 100% satisfactory. So here's a place where when something is offered, you can evaluate whether it met your needs, if something's missing, and maybe what you can take to fill in the missing pieces. Because it is very common for some onboarding to be offered, but it doesn't quite meet the needs fully. You get a C+ with onboarding. So you have that available to you. Lisa will share that, but we won't spend time going over it because we are getting close to the end. And I have a feeling we'll have some conversation around some of these last few things. Just an example showing you what the self-onboarding evaluation looks like. And the health and wellness resources is my example here. Oh yeah, I reviewed the website and I was partially satisfied. And here's what I'd really like. Here's what I still need to know. Here's some more tips for success. These are from the study that I did and from reading 20 years of research studies on onboarding, 22 years. I looked at research studies on onboarding that were done from 2000 to 2022. Give yourself time to learn and adjust. We talked about this a little bit when we went over the needs assessment. It is a learning activity. You are learning so many things. And I know when I started my new job, I was exhausted. My son started a new job recently. He was exhausted at the end of the day because there's a really high demand on you cognitively. You're learning not just how to do the work, but all about your new environment, all about your new coworkers, all about the new rules for interacting with everybody. If you're finding a new place to live, you've got that going on as well. There's a lot going on. Second, if possible, take action before your first day. A number of study participants said that they really appreciated when someone from HR or their new manager contacted them after they had accepted the job and were, hired, but maybe there was a 2-week period between then and when they started to do some paperwork before the first day. So the first day isn't all HR paperwork. If you have a chance to tour your area before the first day, if you have a chance to pick up your computer or do anything, get your ID card, get your email, anything that you can do before your first official day, that's possible. I know that there are different regulations that might prohibit certain things, but what can be done before the first day? Go out to lunch with your new colleagues or your manager. We'll have them take you out to lunch, right? Before your first day, if you can, and just stay in touch. Keep the communication going before the first day. Introductions are important, and that's why it's on the onboarding checklist. Make sure that your new colleagues know who you are and what you're bringing in. They might not be even aware that you're starting. So hiring managers should make sure that they know you're starting. Give them a way to introduce you, but take it at a pace. Here's a story I'll tell you about introductions. When I was a new supervisor and I was responsible for hiring and training, onboarding and training, production assistants in the marketing department, when we had them start, I took them up to the 5th floor where the executive offices were and walked them around and introduced them to all of the vice presidents, and then the next floor, all the directors, and then the next floor, and everybody. I introduced the new people to everybody in the building who was there. And all the people who were there loved it. They loved seeing the new person and getting to meet them. Do you think the new person loved it?
It'd be stressful to have that many new people. You're trying to remember who they were and whatever. But it's good to know what the lay of the land is.
They felt, like you said, it was overwhelming. It was too much. They couldn't remember all those people and all those things. I just threw too much of them all at one time without any context of like, well, when will I see them? How will we work together? Do I call him Dr. Jones or Fred? So that was something that I did with good intentions to introduce everybody, but it really, and later when they knew they could be honest with me and it was safe, they did tell me, Angela, when you took us on that whole tour around Keller Building and introduced us to everybody, that was a little too much. Something else, if you're doing the onboarding, give a safe space for the new hire to give you feedback and evaluation so that you can make the process better. Find a key informant or a buddy. This is one of the #1 most helpful things from years of research and from what participants in my study said. Now, sometimes people, organizations will assign a mentor. This is not quite a mentor. Call it whatever you will. It's less important what you call it and more important that you do it. Call it whatever it takes to get people to do it. That is your go-to person that knows that they are the first point of contact for that new hire on any question they have, and they are ready, willing, and able to do it. Where's the bathroom? Where do I find a money machine? How do people feel if I leave a few minutes early because I have a doctor appointment? Any weird question. Newcomers often have a lot of weird questions that they feel awkward asking their supervisor about. So you've got to have that key informant or buddy ready, willing, and able. Now, don't force somebody to be in this role who doesn't want to do it, because that's worse than having nobody at all. For the newcomer, ask questions and keep asking for what you need. Even if you don't get the most helpful answers, if you go to a person and you ask them a question or you ask them for help and they don't really respond in a helpful way, give them another chance or try another person, right? Keep asking for what you need. Cultivate a positive attitude. There are going to be days where you are feeling overwhelmed, when there's more hindering things going on than helping things going on, but don't let it drag you down. Take a step back, think about, what do I need here? How can I be hopeful and get that thing that you need? Keeping a notebook or log is helpful in doing that, and I encourage you to do that. You can do sort of an online one or a written one, whatever way you like to do it. But people felt that that was helpful for them to not only note tasks and, oh, how do you do this? Or here's my login information, or here's the procedure to follow for this, but also here's how I was feeling today and what I'm going to do about it. Useful to keep a notebook or a log. Questions or comments about these tips for success?
I'll share that when I started my job, a new role 3 years ago, a week before I started, I received a phone call from the head of our department. So Eugene Whitlock, our Chief People and Culture Officer, just saying congratulations and welcome. And he's looking forward to me joining the team. And that was just so surprising and so nice and just made me feel so welcomed and included before I even started. So for managers out there, it's like something like that can go so far by just helping somebody to feel included and excited about their job and know that you're expecting them. Looking forward to having them be part of your team.
Thanks for sharing that, Lisa. That's an excellent comment. I've focused a lot today on the bad things or the hindering things that can happen with a new hire, but there are positive things that happen, and we want to recognize and celebrate them and think about how you can cultivate that positivity for yourself if you're the new hire, or if you're the manager or the person in HR or talent. How can you facilitate that? Or, if you're a coworker and the next time a person starts, how can you cultivate that positive culture, positive climate for them? And I had one other thing. Oh, yeah, here. So those early experiences right before you start and the very first day and the very first week, those stick. Those experiences are very sticky. And if you have a good experience, that really can buoy you up, can buoy the newcomer up when things are stressful. But if that first day and that first week are bad, those bad experiences are sticky too, and they stay with people for a long time. They remember their bad first days. Okay, we're at the end, 3:57. The timing for the exercises didn't work out quite how I planned it, but we worked through it anyway. And I appreciate everybody's engagement and questions and comments so much. Questions and concerns from anybody? And if anybody would like to share your key takeaways, I would love to hear that from you.
My key takeaway is from the start, but go out and get it.
Yeah, I like that. Go out and get it.
One thing I appreciated is that you reiterated.
Oops, we lost who was talking.
Oh, sorry, I got muted. I appreciated you reiterated a need to give ourselves time. And that's something that I know I put a lot of pressure on myself for. So I appreciated that message.
You are welcome.
I guess the takeaway that I have, again, from the supervisor's perspective is we have some processes in place. I think we're moving in the right direction. We plan for people arriving and try to help them feel part of our community when they start. We even have employees sign a welcome card, one of those virtual cards, because we're all virtual now when people join. So people are always surprised by that. But a question that I had was around, I think it was when you were talking about the boredom thing, but I don't think it's specific to that. When somebody is starting is, I'm kind of wondering if you have any thoughts about how do you balance too much checking with a new employee with, being available for them, but also not being like hovering, because it's hard. It's really kind of actually hard to do it virtually because you're being so deliberate about hello, let's check in, let's plan our time together, those kind of things. But just that balance.
Right. What a great question. Well, I think you touched on it, being very purposeful in scheduling and providing structure. Like, we're going to have this check-in like every Monday morning at 10 and every Friday at 10, right? So that they can plan for that. But also making sure that the new hire knows that you are available. Give them the control. You are available when they need to reach out. Maybe set some boundaries around that, like, you have office hours, like, between 10 and 2, you can contact me. And better yet, make sure you have a buddy who's your backup. Their buddy is your backup for answering questions. So if there's you and you've made it clear that you're going to have these specific check-in times during the week, give them the control to ask for more if they want more, or set up office hours that they know you'll be available, and then have that buddy or go-to person assigned as well and do the same thing for that person. That should be pretty good, I would say.
Great, thank you.
I know we're at the top of our hour here, and I want to thank Dr. Rogers so much.
Yay.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers, for
You're still
sharing
new.
your time and expertise, and congratulations on your PhD.
Thank you.
Yes, just less than a week, so that is great. And again, thank you for sharing all the, the efforts of your research and work with us to support us to be effective with onboarding as managers and supervisors, and to have some ownership to support our own success for those who are onboarding a new role. So really appreciate your time. You're volunteering your time to be with us here today. So big thanks, and thank you all for being here. I'll follow up with some resources in the evaluation link. And if there's anything that I can do to support you in my role to help you acclimate and onboard, please reach out to me and I'll follow up with an email with some resources. So have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody, and take care.
Bye, and thank you
so
much.
much.